back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Where have all the good times gone? Where have all the good times gone?
And welcome to The Law Show, or as we like to call it, the Family Law Show. For this particular show, David Halkett is here, family lawyer with McQuarrie Hunter in Surrey. We talked about, money in the last segment. Kids, this has got to be the hardest thing to talk about, and maybe one of the reasons why people put off separating and divorcing. And do you see that people wait to a certain age before they decide to go ahead?
Yeah, I think some certainly do. I've had people separating, the kids are like less than a year old, right? Often in that case, they just weren't expecting the significant change that happens to their life in all aspects of it with the child. But sometimes they want to put off till children are a little older. Although oddly enough, the children almost handled it better when they're younger because they don't know any different.
They're not entrenched in a certain way, right?
And, kids are always caught in the middle no matter what, right? Maybe the one parent doesn't want to take them to certain events and, sporting events or whatever, and they end up fighting over that. The kids are always caught in the middle, and it can be probably more emotional than the money aspects because a lot of them think they can always make the money again, but you never get the time back with your children. Before you know it, they're like teenagers. And
are men more likely to give up money than women when it comes to digging in? When it comes to kids? I've always, again, just based solely on my experience, moms tend to be more willing to take a little bit less if you have more time with the children, whereas men will take less time with the children if they can pay less. It's just, it's again, anecdotal, every case is different, but women tend to the moms want more time with the children because I think there's still a societal that if they don't have at least half or more time with them, that there must be something wrong with them. Because usually, unless there's some drug issues or other issues, for the most part, the moms will have at least half the time. And then the dads say, okay, I'll take half the load because I'm not paying support half of the time. Because child support is based on residency of the children. So if you both have half, you may get a reduction in the amount of support you have to pay, either the mom to the dad or the dad to the mom. And in the 20 years since you've been practicing family law, have you seen the role of fathers change? Oh, for sure. As I've said in previous shows, that in the past, the dad would show up and he'd lucky to get every second weekend, the old weekend dad that they used to have, right? And, you maybe get a couple of weeks in the summer. Now, it's rare that a dad goes in and is willing to accept just that because we're been a lot more involved. Like, when I look back at my dad, no dad loved their son more than mine loved me. But, he went to work during the day and my mom was the one to pick me up at school and she took me to my hockey practices and he went to the games and yelled at me if I did something wrong, that kind of stuff, right? He was just always at work. And whereas me, I drive my son to school because my wife works downtown. So and a lot of my other clients, they're the ones who were involved in childcare and stuff. And we're just more involved, I think. And I think it's good. Obviously, I think our children need both, but it causes more of an issue at the end of it because often they both were great parents till they separated. Then they start trying to throw mud on each other, how they were bad parents. And that doesn't help. But the courts still give mothers more time when they're younger. So walk me through the sort of grade and how it typically works. So for a child up to a year, usually it's going to be very primarily with the mom. Dad will, especially if the child's still breastfeeding, mom will probably, or I should say dad will have 3-4 times a week for a couple hours, maybe 3 hours at most. 1 to 5, they start getting, some overnights. At the lower end, from between 1 and 5, you may get one overnight, or you get a lot more time during the day, especially because for most part, breastfeeding ends by a year, and that's usually a factor in all cases with young children. So by the time you get closer to 5, you can have full weekends. You might be even getting up to more of a shared parenting situation. Over 5, you can start getting a lot more shared, depending on, of course, where the parents live and what's best for the child. It's always the big test is what's the best interest of the child. It's the only test. But of course, you're always looking at how does this factor in for the child. Now, at what age do the children get a say?
Is it when it's the age of majority?
No. Under our law, after a child is 8, you can start considering his or her views.
But do they really know what they're getting into?
They ask for the views at that age.
Right.
But it's given less weight. By the time
because they can be influenced.
Exactly. By the time they're 12 or 13, usually, unless there's a good reason not to follow what the child wants, you go by what the child wants. When they're a teenager, 14, 15, pretty well they're going to choose. Mm-hmm. Although it's funny when you said they can be influenced at 8. Often they're influenced differently when they're older because they can be influenced by less rules in the home. Mm-hmm. You know, while you might get a better gaming system, you know, we'll get you a car if you live with us. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that can factor in, and a lot of that. So every time a child says they want to move, there's usually a reason. They may be closer to the parent, but often it's because the rules are more lax at one parent's than the others.
So kids are really just looking out for their own self-interest.
Yeah, and you know, I think the one thing that I'm not a child of divorce myself. My parents were always together until my dad died. But when your parents are having difficulties, you have no say in the matter. Like if my wife and I told our son we're separating, he has no say in the matter. It's total lack of control. And if you ask them, they almost invariably would want their parents to be together. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be the kid whose parents live in different places and get shuttled back and forth. So it's not easy on them. They have no power in anything, and other people are making decisions for them that they may not like. So
when they actually get to an age where they can make a decision for themselves, they will exercise it.
Often, yeah. Although there's also some research has shown that the children don't like the power being given to them because they don't want to choose between their parents.
Right.
They love both.
They don't want to be the bad guy.
Exactly. You know, oh, well, you want to live with your dad, and then they feel bad because the mom's alone, and vice versa, right? And such.
Now, what happens, you know, the old boomerang kids that leave, go to college, come back, and, you know, like, is there a point where parents say, well, how come I'm paying for these adult children to be living in my basement?
Yeah, the adult, when you're an adult child, you can only get maintenance for that child if they are over 19 and incapable of maintaining themselves for a disability,
right? Or
if they're in school,
right?
The fact they can't get a job usually is not sufficient.
There's a lot of people, well, I still need to be on the payroll. Actually, you could go and work. Well, that's not be the job you thought you wanted.
And a good rule of thumb is usually 1 degree. So we go 18 to 21, 22 for a degree. Usually that's as long as you're a child of marriage, unless the parents had an agreement that they were going to cover like a second degree. Like, you know, sometimes you have the West Van ones. There was a case a number of years ago where we'd already planned the kid was going to get a PhD or go into medical school. That was something that they were going to have to pay, but usually 1 degree. And if you're the kid who goes home and he just wants to work part-time and play video games all day, you're not going to get covered for that child. In most cases.
Oh, these first world problems.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what about if that kid doesn't want to go and get his PhD?
Well, obviously, obviously
a lot of pressure on him.
Exactly, yeah. But we planned for you to get that doctorate and worked at Harvard. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So with children, the courts are seeing this moving towards a 50-50 split.
Yeah, it's more of a shared. Definitely, unless there's a reason not to have joint decision making, so you're both going to be guardians, equal parenting responsibilities. Unless there's a reason not to, that's pretty well the norm. Nothing's ever set in stone because we always have to look at what's best for the children. But there's always some things you go into it's not a presumption, but it's a likely going to be the result. Then it's just working out what time is best for the children and where they live, etc.
Do you ever see any horrible situations where the father, for example, didn't want kids to, like they just want to be an absentee parent and go on with their life, and the mom can take the kids? I mean, it's sad, but it happens.
Yeah, I know people who are like that, and the amount of time that the dad spends is like 20% of the time. It's like, it's sad for the children, but you can't ever force someone to actually see their children. Mm-hmm. And that's why, they often, and of course, at the end of the day, usually it's the mom who ends up getting left holding the bag, so to speak, because they're not going to not take care of their children in most cases.
And those are the ones who say, brought my kids up on my own without any help. And all
exactly.
That kind of stuff. Now, moving is totally true, because I'm a product of a broken family, and my mom moved to a different country when I was little. That's not on today.
No, it's difficult. You have to show that it's best for the children. Although if you are the primary parent and the other parent has less than a shared situation, there's a presumption that you should be able to move, unless the others can show that it shouldn't be. But it's not an easy move application anymore, because both parents are so involved. Although a lot of people meet people online now from overseas, and they move for other relationships. And that can be a factor as well.
But didn't you tell me a story one time that somebody lived in one end of the greater Vancouver area and the other person in the other, and they didn't want them to move because it was going to be inconvenient?
Yeah, that's not a mobility case, but they were arguing that that's not really good for me to move from White Rock, say, to Maple Ridge. It's like, the courts usually don't look at that and say you aren't allowed to move. It's within the Lower Mainland.
Right.
It can be tough, of course, if you want to. If you're, say in your situation, you're in, Vancouver, and then one wants to move to Chilliwack, sure, it's within the Lower Mainland.
But how are you going to
You can't co-parent in that situation. One has to have the primary, just because of the distance. That's why, for a shared situation to work, you have to live close enough to each other.
Right. Well, that's just common sense, right? Yeah. But common sense doesn't factor into when people are getting divorced.
No, it doesn't.
Or else you wouldn't have a job.
Exactly.
We're speaking with David Halkett, family lawyer at McQuarrie Hunter, the Family Law Show. And we'll pick it up next on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.